our infantry advances. 4 o'clock, the rebel battery opens, and it was with the opening of the rebel battery that the battle began in earnest. Lee pressured the entire northern defensive line. General Hancock, in charge of that line, shuttled the reserves up and back, and then 4 hours after the battle had begun, around dusk, he discovered there was a quarter of a mile of his line unguarded, and there were over 1,000 Alabama troops heading right for it. They were less than 350 yards away. If they reached that spot, they'd cut the Union Army in two, the battle would be over, and Lee would have his victory. He sent for replacements to come on the run, but he knew he had to slow the advance. He said, I knew I needed 5 minutes or all was lost. The only organized unit in the area was the 1st Minnesota. They were guarding artillery in the back, less than 300 men. Hancock yelled, "Is this all we have?" It was. He ordered them to charge. One Minnesota soldier said, "We knew what the order meant. Wounds, death to us all. To gain a few minutes, to save a position, maybe a battlefield." And yet all of us saw and accepted the reason for that sacrifice. Isaac and his fellows attached bayonets, and Colonel Colville, who led them into battle, said they formed a beautiful line heading down the slopes. One survivor said, "Shells screeched over our heads, bullets whizzed past us, canister and grape fell about us, comrade after comrade dropped from the ranks, but we did not look back. We had no time to weep." Another soldier said, "Great heavens, how fast our men fell. Every step seemed to be over a dead comrade. But the boys do not falter. They close every gap, and pressing shoulder to shoulder, they move on without word or cheer, but with a silent, desperate determination. They moved on in an unbroken line. When they neared the Alabama troops, they delivered their first volley, and then they charged. One Minnesota soldier said, "There's no way a man living that could stand that kind of charge, delivered with such momentum and such evident desperation." They broke the Alabama first line. They took up defensive positions wherever they could, below a bank of a dry riverbed, behind trees, rocks, and they fought as long as they could until withering gunfire forced them to withdraw. Of the men who entered the field that day, 178 were killed or wounded. All of the 1st Minnesota's officers were killed or wounded. But they gave Hancock his 5 minutes. He would say later, "I was fortunate to meet so grand a group as the 1st Minnesota. I knew that they would lose heavily when I gave the order, but had I thought that every one of them would be killed, I still would have given it. It was a sacrifice that must be made. There is no grander deed in recorded history." That night, Isaac didn't return to the regiment. Henry knew that he either had been killed or wounded. He searched for him, but couldn't find him. He wrote, "I sleep tonight under the moonlight, rather sorrowful. Where's Isaac?" The next morning, a soldier woke him and said he thought he had seen Isaac. He said, "I followed him, and there was my dear brother dead. A shell hit him in the top of the head and passed out his back. The poor fellow never knew what hit him. I secured his pocketbook, his knife, his watch, his diary, and with 2 friends buried him where he had fallen, about a mile south of Gettysburg, near a stone wall. Henry put a board at the head of the grave. On it he inscribed, "No useless coffin enclosed his breast, but like a warrior taking his rest, he lay with his shelter tent around him." He finished Isaac's diary. He said the owner of this diary was killed around dusk on July 2nd, 1863. His face was toward the enemy. Henry kept Isaac's goods, but he sent the diary home. It contained a few newspaper articles, a creased map, and 3 pictures. One was of a pretty girl. He had found it on the battlefield at Fredericksburg, and he used to joke with Henry that he knew her name and address, and one day he would write her and tell her where she was. To his parents, he wrote, "Isaac did not die in vain. Though you have lost one of your 6 soldiers on the altar of this country, 'twas a glorious death." To his sister, he wrote, "I thought I saw him fall. No time to stop then. Faltering might have given the battle to our enemy. Oh, he was a good soldier. His comrades always talked about his coolness and calmness in action." In the diary, you will find a piece of paper, a memorandum written in his own hand. Please copy this into the diary. It speaks there of Henry and I take a cup of coffee. It was the last time we ate or drank together.